The universe didn't just have laws, it had rules. The Krell hegemony enforced them. From the shimmering gravity wells of Krelli's Prime to the dust-choked frontiers of the Perseus Arm, the hegemony's word was physics, and their armada was its unyielding fist. Their technology was ancient, perfected, and utterly stagnant. They utilized the accepted pathways, hyperlanes for travel, kinetic rods for orbital persuasion, and focused plasma for thermal sanitation. Their ships were mountains of black, obsidian-like armor, blotting out stars as they moved with the slow, inevitable creep of a glacier. And they were, at this moment, moving to erase the human colony on New Delphi. On the bridge of the Krell flagship, the indomitable Grand Archon Valerius watched the target resolve on his main screen. New Delphi was a collection of pathetic, glittering domes on a green, marginal world. The humans, a species barely out of their atmospheric cradle, had expanded with the reckless speed of bacteria. They were loud, chaotic, and worst of all, disrespectful of the established hierarchies. They had settled on a world claimed, though unused, by the hegemony. Thus, they required sanitation. "All vessels report readiness for sterilization protocol." Valerius's voice, a low baritone rumble, filled the cavernous bridge. His high-backed command chair felt more like a throne. He was a Krell 7 feet tall, with skin the color of polished mahogany and 4 eyes, 2 forward, 2 orbital, that missed nothing. "Second and third flotillas confirm readiness, Grand Archon," his subcommander, Crix, intoned, his own voice a respectful hiss. "The Vindicator is moving to polar orbit to ensure complete kinetic coverage." "And the human defenses?" Valerius asked, already bored. 4 orbital platforms, plasma-based, and 1 vessel." Valerius's 2 orbital eyes swiveled to focus on Crix. 1 vessel." Crix hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty. "It appeared 3 vectors shy of the inner marker, sir. It did not use a standard hyperlane exit. It just arrived. It is small, frigate class, perhaps, designation, IFV Covenant." Valerius allowed himself a moment of dry amusement. "A single frigate, how very human. They are a species defined by pointless emotional gestures. They seek the noble last stand." "Very well, obliterate it first. Make it an example." "Yes, Grand Archon." Crix turned to the tactical console. "Target the Covenant, all batteries, fire on my mark." "Grand Archon," the sensor technician suddenly shouted, his voice strained. "The target, the Covenant. Its energy signature is, I don't know what it is." "Define I don't know," Valerius said, his voice dropping a degree. "It is, flat, sir. It's projecting a null energy field, but the core is bleeding tachyons. And, forgive me, Archon, its reading is everywhere. The signature is localized, but its quantum state is smeared." Valerius stared at the tiny icon on the map. The IFV Covenant. It hung in the black, doing nothing, a single human ship against 300 Krell capital vessels. "They are trying to confuse our sensors, a pathetic parlor trick. Fire." Crix relayed the command, "All batteries fire." Aboard the IFV Covenant, the universe was screaming. The bridge was not a grand cavern, but a tight, dark cockpit, smelling of ozone, hot metal, and stale coffee. Captain Elias Thorne was strapped into his command chair, his knuckles white on the armrests. He wasn't looking at the Krell Armada on his main screen. He was looking at the specialized console to his left, where his son was strapped into a chair that looked more like a vivisection table. Dr. Aris Thorne, pale, drenched in sweat, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, was physically connected to the ship. A neurointerface helmet covered his eyes, and silvery, fiber-optic cables snaked from the loom console into ports along his arms. "Aris," Elias said, his voice strained, "status." I can feel them, Dad," Aris whispered. His voice was distant, echoing as if coming from the bottom of a well. "So many, so loud, their engines, their brute force, they're smashing reality into shape. It's ugly." "The drive, Aris, not your aesthetic critique. Can it handle this?" It can handle the spin," Aris hissed, gritting his teeth. "The jump is easy, it's the resolve holding us here when every atom wants to be elsewhere. That's the part that hurts." Elias looked at his tactical officer, Commander Kenna Reyes. She was steady, her dark eyes scanning the data feed, her face illuminated by the soft glow of her console. "They've targeted us, Captain," she said, her voice impossibly calm. "Krell Armada is firing, full spread, kinetics plasma." "How long?" Elias asked. "0.05 seconds to impact." Elias Thorne looked back at his son. He saw not the prodigy who had torn up the rulebook of physics, but the 10-year-old boy he'd failed to protect after the tragedy on Mars. The boy who had buried his grief in equations, emerging with something monstrous and beautiful. Eris, Elias said, a command, a plea. Now. Eris didn't respond. He simply threw his head back and screamed, a raw, silent scream that Elias felt in his teeth. Outside the Covenant, the Krell Armada unleashed hell. 1,000 lances of plasma and 100 kinetic rods, each the size of a skyscraper, converged on the single point of blackness where the human ship sat. The vacuum flashed white, a man-made star detonating in the void. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Crix nodded in satisfaction. Target neutralized, Grand Archon, total annihilation. Predictable, Valeria said. He gestured at the main screen. Now proceed with the sanitation of New Del. SIR, the sensor technician, was on his feet, his 4 eyes wide with disbelief. The signature, it's behind us. Valerius's head snapped around. What? Crix's hands flew over his console. He's right, Grand Archon, the human ship. It's inside our formation, after the 3rd flotilla. How did it move? It hadn't moved, it hadn't jumped. The IFV Covenant had simply ceased to be at its original coordinates and begun to be at its new ones. It had folded space. It had treated the 3-dimensional battlefield as a piece of paper, punched a hole through it, and emerged on the other side. The Krell interdiction field, designed to stop ships from entering hyperspace, was useless. The Covenant hadn't used hyperspace. It hadn't traveled at all. And it had resolved its existence in a space already occupied. The Krell destroyer Unstoppable was suddenly, catastrophically attempting to exist in the same coordinates as the Covenant. The laws of physics, which the Krell held so dear, reasserted themselves with apocalyptic violence. The Unstoppable, a ship 3 kilometers long, was torn apart from the inside out. Its reactor core, breached by the Covenant's sudden presence, detonated. The destroyer vanished in a silent, expanding sphere of plasma. On the Covenant's bridge, the ship shuddered, the sound of tearing metal screaming through the hull. Hull integrity at 92%, Reyes shouted, holding her console as the shockwave hit them. We phased through their aft shielding but clipped the reactor housing. Eris was gasping, a thin line of blood trickling from his nose. Too close. I miscalculated the fold. The math is dense. He's bleeding, Elias said, his heart pounding. I'm fine, Eris snapped. We're through, we're in the pocket. They were in the soft, unprotected center of the Krell Armada, surrounded. Grand Archon, Crix stammered, his usual composure shattered. The Unstoppable, it's gone, the human ship. It destroyed it just by appearing. Grand Archon Valerius rose from his throne. His 4 eyes were fixed on the tiny human ship now sitting pristine amid the expanding wreckage of one of his capital vessels. The Covenant looked undamaged. It just sat there, humming with that impossible, smeared energy. He saw no engines, no warp nacelles, no plasma ports. It was a knife of a ship, all sharp angles and a hull so black it seemed to drink the light. That, Valerius whispered, a cold, alien dread coiling in his gut, is not possible. They did not jump. They did not move. They rewrote their position. Sir, the rest of the Armada is. They are confused. Awaiting orders, Crix said, his voice trembling. Orders? Valerius felt a surge of cold, primal fury. Orders are to kill it. All ships reorient, converge on the anomaly, fire everything. I want that ship reduced to its constituent atoms. It's working, Dad, Eris breathed, a manic grin touching his lips. They're scared. They're angry, Elias corrected, his voice grim. And they're turning, Reyes solutions. They're too close, Captain, Reyes said, her face taut. We're inside their minimum firing range for kinetics, but the plasma, they're going to saturate the entire sector. Eris, Elias said, can you get us out? Out, no, Eris laughed, a thin, cracked sound. We just got here, they want to see the trick, I'll show them the trick. Eris, no, stick to the plan, evasive fold. This is the plan, Dad, Eris shouted. The Covenant isn't a ship, it's a ghost, let me show them. He slammed his hands down onto the neurointerface. His head snapped back. Eris. Energy spike, Reyes yelled. The drive is, oh my God. On the Indomitable's bridge, Valerius watched as his fleet obeyed. Hundreds of plasma batteries turned. The blackness of space began to glow green as the pre-fire sequences initiated. Target is static, Grand Archon, Crix reported. It's just sitting there. Arrogant vermin, Valeria spat. Execute. The command was given. A tidal wave of white-hot plasma, enough to scour the surface of a continent, erupted from the Krell fleet. It converged not on the Covenant, but through it. The plasma lances passed through the human ship, as if it were a hologram. The Covenant shimmered, like a heat haze on a desert road, and then solidified untouched. A stunned, absolute silence fell over the bridge of the Indomitable. The sensor technician was frantically checking his readings. Sir, the impacts, they didn't happen. The ship registered 0% energy absorption. It went intangible. Phase shifting, Valerius breathed, horrified. A theoretical impossibility, the energy cost, it would require a star. Not energy, Aris whispered on his own bridge, his nose now bleeding freely. He was vibrating in his chair. Just math, we're not in phase, we're just holding ourselves in a state of quantum sewer position. We're here and not here, but I can't hold it long. The observers, they're all looking. It's making it hard to resolve. Elias, Reyes said, her voice shaking for the first time. He's killing himself. I know, Elias said, which is why we're not wasting it, Reyes tactical. Reyes' professionalism snapped back into place. Aye, sir, we're in the heart of their formation, targets everywhere. Weapons, Elias ordered, fire the lances. Firing singularity lances, Reyes confirmed. The Covenant didn't have guns, not in the conventional sense. It couldn't. Firing a projectile or a laser would violate its own quantum state. Instead, it weaponized the fissure drive itself. From 3 hardpoints on the Covenant's hull, nothing emerged. No light, no beam, no projectile. Instead, 3 Krell battlecruisers, the Righteous Fury, the Hegemon's Will, and the Sanctifier, suddenly stopped. On their bridges, alarms blared. Gravity distortions, hull breach, we're being crushed. The Covenant had used the fissure drive to fold space inside the Krell ships. It had targeted their reactor cores, and for a nanosecond, created 3 microscopic, hyperdense gravity wells. The 3 battlecruisers imploded. They did not explode. They were crushed like tin cans, collapsing in on themselves, their armor folding, their reactors extinguishing. They were reduced to 3 small, dense, tumbling knots of wreckage. On the Indomitable, Valerius watched 3 of his capital ships die. He watched them die from a weapon he did not understand, fired from a ship that defied physics, piloted by a species he had dismissed as vermin. He felt the first, cold tendril of something he had not experienced in his 400 years of command. Panic. This is a violation, he whispered, his voice shaking with a rage so profound it bordered on terror. This is an abomination. Crix was frozen, his 4 eyes locked on the Covenant. Grand Archon, what are they? Get me the Hegemon, Valerius roared, finding his voice. Get me High Command, now, send the data, tell them. Tell them the humans are breaking reality. Humans aren't supposed to have ships like this. The Covenant sat silent in the void, a ghost surrounded by the wreckage of its victims, its engines humming a song the universe had never heard. And on its bridge, Aris Thorn began to choke. The panic on the Indomitable's bridge was a cold, infectious thing. It spread not as screams or chaos, the Krell were too disciplined for that, but as a frozen, terrible silence. The tactical displays were a mess of contradictory data. 3 capital ships were gone, crushed into nothing. The human ship, the Covenant, remained that impossible smear on their sensors, floating with the arrogance of a god. Grand Archon, Crix finally said, his voice strained, the 2nd and 3rd flotillas are demanding orders. They're targeting locks. They won't hold. The target keeps drifting in and out of quantum state. Tell them to hold formation, Valerius snapped, his composure cracking. He was staring at the recording of the battlecruisers imploding. It wasn't a weapon, it was surgery. The humans hadn't attacked his ships. They had edited them out of existence. This is not warfare. This is blasphemy. He turned to his communications officer. Is the channel to Krelly's Prime open? Did you send the data? Yes, Grand Archon, the officer replied. The High Hegemon is receiving, but the data, the anomaly. It is causing temporal distortion in the Ansible feed. The signal is corrupted. Valerius felt his blood run cold. The human ship wasn't just breaking physics, it was breaking communication. It was isolating them. Then we will handle this ourselves, Valerius said, his voice a low growl. He was an Archon of the hegemony. He had sanitized 1,000 worlds. He would not be rooted by a single inexplicable thing. All ships execute Protocol Omega, saturation grid, do not target the ship, target the space it occupies, create a collapsing gravity well. If it is in that space, it will be crushed. If it is not, it will be revealed. Fire the anchors. It was a desperation move. The gravity anchors were asteroids, tractor-beamed into place and then detonated, their combined mass momentarily warping local space. It was crude, brutal, and the only weapon he had that didn't rely on hitting a target that refused to be hit. "Acknowledge Archon," Crick said, relief flooding his voice. "Protocol Omega, firing anchors." On the Covenant, the bridge was a scene of controlled chaos. Aris, breathe." Elias Thorne had unstrapped himself and was kneeling by his son's console, his hand on Aris's shoulder. Aris was convulsing, his body rigid, a froth of bloody spittle on his lips. He's fine," Aris gasped, his eyes still hidden by the neurohelmet squeezed shut. "It's just the feedback, the loom isn't shielded enough. When those cruisers imploded, I felt them, I felt all of them, every life, extinguished it. It's a lot of noise." "He's in neural shock, Captain," Kenna Reyes shouted from her station. "The loom is redlining. If he doesn't decouple, it'll fry his brain." I can't," Aris choked. "If I decouple now, the sewer position, it collapses. We'll just be here sitting ducks. We have to fold first." "Then fold," Elias yelled, shaking him. "Get us out, Aris, that's an order." "The Krell," Reyes interrupted, her voice tight with new alarm. "They're deploying something new, asteroids, dozens of them there. They're not firing them there, creating a perimeter. Oh God, Captain, they're creating a gravity trap. They're going to detonate them simultaneously." Elias looked at the screen. The Krell Armada was pulling back, forming a wide circle, and in the center with the Covenant were 30 massive asteroids, maneuvered by tractor beams, humming with energy. "They're trying to pin us in real space," Elias breathed. "They're using mass to force us to resolve." They're smart," Aris whispered, a note of impressed surprise in his voice. They're observing us, the observer effect. They're trying to force a quantum resolution. It's making it so heavy." Aris screamed as the loom console sparked, showering the deck with white-hot light. "They're detonating," Reyes shouted. "Impact, no, wave in 5 seconds." "Aris," Elias roared. "I'm trying," Aris bellowed. He slammed his consciousness against the drive. He wasn't just piloting a ship, he was negotiating with reality. The Krell were shouting at it with gravity, he was whispering to it with math. "It won't fold the space, it's too bent, it's not paper anymore, it's steel, I can't punch through." "Then don't," Elias said, his mind racing. He looked at the expanding energy signature of the Krell trap. It wasn't a kinetic blast, it was a wave of pure, crushing gravity. "Don't go through, go around." Around what? There's no around in Fisher space." "You said you're here and not here," Elias said, gripping his son's console. "Stop being here, don't fold, don't move, just let go." Aris's head went limp. "Let go." "The trap is designed to crush what's in this sector. Don't be in it. Go intangible again. Can you do it?" "The observer effect. It's too strong. They're all looking," Aris gasped. "But the detonation, that's not observation, that's interference." 2 seconds, Reyes yelled. "Do it, Aris," Elias commanded. "Full superposition now." Aris didn't answer. He slumped in his chair, the blood from his nose now a steady stream. On the console, the loom's light changed from frantic red to a deep, steady, impossible blue. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Valerius watched as the 30 asteroids detonated. The synchronized blast created a localized gravity shear, a ripple in spacetime that converged on the Covenant's exact position, the space where the ship had been twisted. Light itself bent around the event, and then the sector snapped back to normal. Crix checked his board. The anomaly is gone, Grand Archon. The shear was successful. The target has been compressed, neutralized." Valerius allowed himself a single, sharp exhale. He felt the cold sweat on his brow. He had lost 4 capital ships, including the Unstoppable. He had lost 20,000 crew, but the abomination was destroyed. "Scan the debris," Valerius ordered, sinking back into his throne. I want proof. I want a piece of that ship." "Scanning, sir. There's no debris, no wreckage, no exotic particles, no signature at all." Valerius's 4 eyes snapped open. "What?" "It's just gone, sir, the gravity shear. It should have left a signature, a compression, something." A cold, sick feeling washed over the Grand Archon. It wasn't destroyed. Sir, it used the detonation, Valerius whispered, horrified. It used the chaos of the gravity shear, the interference, to hide, to mask its escape. He looked at the tactical map. Where is it? Where is it? The Covenant resolved into real space, with a groan of metal that sounded like a dying whale. The bridge lights flickered, died, and came back on at half power. They were in the Aegis Nebula, the same system, but they were millions of kilometers away, hidden deep inside the roiling, crimson clouds of interstellar dust. Elias was thrown against the loom console. He scrambled to his feet. Ray's status. I think we're alive, Captain, Kenna said, her voice shaking. She ran a hand through her short, dark hair. Hull integrity, 60%, the fissure fold. It was violent. We didn't so much jump as we were flung. We're deep in the nebula. Sensors are, shielded by the dust. Elias turned to Aris. His son was limp in the chair, the neuro-helmet dark, the cables slack. Aris, Elias ripped the helmet off his son's head. Aris's eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. The pupils were dilated, unfocused. A single tear, stained pink with blood, rolled down his temple. Med team, Elias bellowed, hitting the comm. Bridge now. He gently unclipped the neuro cables from his son's arms. The skin around the ports was raw, burned. Aris, talk to me. Aris blinked, his gaze slowly focused on his father. Did we win? He whispered. We survived, Elias said, his voice thick. We survived. The jump, it was wrong, Aris mumbled, his speech slurred. I didn't fold space. I tore it just a little when their trap hit. I pushed us sideways into the other verse. Elias froze. The what? The place between the folds, the loom. It's based on their math. Whose math, Aris? Aris's eyes unfocused again, looking through his father. The ones who sing in the static. They showed me how to unbe. It was so cold. The med team burst onto the bridge, led by Dr. Lena Hansen. Captain, stand aside. They began working on Aris, checking his vitals, shining a light into his vacant eyes. He's suffering from massive neural trauma, Hansen said, her voice clipped and professional. And, God, his brainwaves are wrong. They're not human. They're patterned. Get him on the stabilizer now. As they lifted Aris onto a gurney, his hand feebly grabbed his father's uniform. Dad. I'm here, son. They hate the Krell, Aris whispered, a strange, faint smile on his face. They call them the jailers. Aris lost consciousness. Elias watched them wheel his son off the bridge. The silence that descended was heavier than the Krell gravity trap. Captain, Ray's said, her voice soft. New Delphi, the Krell fleet, they're leaving. Elias turned to the main screen. Sure enough, the sensor feed, peering through the nebula's dust, showed the Indomitable and the remnants of the Krell armada moving, not toward the colony, but away. They were gathering, forming a tight, defensive formation, and then one by one they tore open hyperspace windows and vanished. They had retreated. A single, battered human frigate had routed an entire hegemony armada. It should have been a victory. It felt like a funeral. They're not just retreating, Elias said, staring at the empty space where the Krell had been. They're running from us. From the Covenant, Ray's corrected. No, Elias said, walking over to the loom. The central console where his son had been connected was dark, but it was humming, a low, subsonic vibration that he could feel in his bones. They're running from this. Aris, what have you done? What have you found? He looked at Tila, the ship's Zethian comms officer who had been silent at her console the entire time. The Zethians were a subjugated species, gifted to the hegemony, prized for their ability to navigate complex data streams. Tila was pale, her large, liquid black eyes wide. Tila, Elias asked. Tila looked up, her slender, four-fingered hands trembling. Captain, the jailers. That is a word from the Zethian first tongue, an ancient word, a forbidden word. Forbidden by who? By the Krell, Tila whispered. When they uplifted us, they purged our histories, our religions, all except one myth of the Void Singers, the beings who taught us the first math before the Krell came and saved us. The Krell call them the Abomination. Elias Thorne looked at the dark loom console, which was now, impossibly, beginning to glow with that same, steady blue light. The victory at New Delphi wasn't an end. It was the beginning of a war he didn't understand, using a weapon his son had stolen from sleeping gods. And the Krell weren't the enemy. They were just the ones standing guard. "Raise," Elias said, his voice hard. "Plot a course. Station Prime, we need. We need to talk to High Command and get Dr. Hansen back up here. I want her to tell me exactly what's wrong with my son's brain." "Aye, Captain." But Elias knew. Aris wasn't just the pilot of the Covenant anymore. He was its channel, and something from a very cold, very dark place was starting to channel back. The journey to Station Prime was a long, haunted silence. The Covenant limped through the back routes of human-controlled space, its fissure drive cold and offline. Without Aris, the loom was just a sculpture of inert alloys and dead fiber optics. The ship, which had moved like a ghost, now crawled on conventional, inefficient thrusters. The crew, exhilarated by their impossible victory, slowly grew sober. They had seen the cost. They had seen Aris Thorn carried from the bridge, not as a hero, but as a casualty, his mind saturated with an alien geometry. Station Prime was humanity's fist, hidden in the hollowed-out asteroid belt of a dead star system. It was a fortress of gray titanium and flickering comms towers, home to the Earth Defense Fleet's High Command. As the Covenant drifted into the massive, pressurized docking bay, it looked small, scarred, and utterly alien compared to the bulky, practical destroyers and carriers docked nearby. Elias Thorn, flanked by Kenna Reyes and Tila, strode through the decontamination airlock and into the sterile glare of the command center. Admiral Shara Vance was waiting for them. She was a woman who looked like she'd been carved from ironwood, her face a mask of uncompromising authority. "Captain Thorn," she said, her voice crisp, bypassing all pleasantries, "the fleet is calling what you did at New Delphi the miracle. The Krell hegemony has pulled back 5 light years. 5 light years, they're fortifying their borders, they're terrified." She didn't smile. "Report." "The miracle, Admiral, cost us the drive," Elias said flatly, "and it may have cost me my son." He laid it all out, the fissure drive, the quantum superposition, the singularity lances, and the other verse. He told her what Aris had said, the jailers, the void singers. Reyes stepped forward. "Admiral, the Krell weren't just attacking, they were probing. When they realized what the Covenant could do, their tactics shifted. They weren't trying to destroy us. They were trying to capture us. And when that failed, they tried to contain us. The gravity trap, it wasn't designed to kill. It was designed to hold." Vance processed this, her eyes narrowing. "And this, Zethian?" She turned her gaze to Tila, who stood stiffly, her black eyes reflecting the room. "Tila," Elias said gently. "Admiral," Tila began, her voice quiet but clear. "The Krell fear this technology not because it is new, but because it is old, my people. We had it, or something like it. Eons ago, the Krell call our mastery of it the Great Sin. They saved us from it by enslaving us. They believe the first math, what Dr. Thorne calls the Fisher physics, is a contagion, a sound that once heard cannot be unheard. They believe it calls the void singers." "And what are these singers?" Vance demanded. "In our myths," Tila looked down, "gods in Krell doctrine, non-Euclidean parasites. Beings that do not exist in our dimension but can influence it. They believe the Fisher drive doesn't fold space, it thins it. It makes a spot weak enough for them to touch." A heavy silence filled the command center. The miracle was suddenly feeling very, very hollow. "So we have a weapon," Vance said, summarizing with brutal clarity, "that defeats our greatest enemy, but which may, in the process, summon an older enemy that will destroy us all. Is that the situation, Captain?" "That is the situation, Admiral," Elias confirmed. "Where is Dr. Thorne now?" "He's in isolation, deep core medical," Elias said. "Dr. Hansen is monitoring him. He's changed." The medical bay was dark, shielded against every known form of energy. Aris Thorne sat on a simple cot, not in a medical gown, but in his own clothes. He was sketching, not on a data slate, but on a piece of flimsy paper with a simple carbon pencil. He looked up as Elias entered. His eyes were clear, the blood gone. He looked calm, too calm. "Hello, Dad," he said, his voice soft. "Aris," Elias pulled up a stool. "How are you feeling?" "Quiet," Aris replied, tapping the pencil against the paper. "They shut down the loom. It was hard, it was so loud in my head. The patterns, the music, now it's just static. I miss it." "Aris, what you did?" "I saved them," Aris said, not with pride, but with simple fact. "I saved New Delphi, and I touched the truth." "What truth?" Aris held up the paper. It was covered in equations, but they weren't equations Elias recognized. They were loops, spirals, geometries that seemed to fold in on themselves. They hurt to look at. This, Aris said, this is their language, the Krell. They're so primitive. They think the universe is A to B. They think in straight lines. They move, they push, they burn, he scoffed. But they, the singers, they don't move at all. They just are in all places. And we, with the loom, we just vibrated at their frequency. We sang back. Aris, Tila said they're dangerous, parasites. Are they? Aris looked at his father, his gaze unnervingly direct. Or are the Krell just jealous? The Krell rule this dimension. They're the biggest things in the room, but the singers, they're the house. The Krell are just guests, loud, obnoxious guests who are terrified of the owners coming home. And you, Elias asked, his voice rough, what are you? Aris looked down at his hands. I'm the one who knocked on the door, and I think they're about to answer. What does that mean? It means I can still feel them, Aris whispered. Even with the loom off, they're aware of us now, of humanity. They're curious, and the Krell. Oh, the Krell know it. They're not just fortifying their border against us, Dad. They're building a cage around Earth. On Krelli's prime, a world of black basalt cities under a dying red star, Grand Archon Valerius knelt. He was in the sanctum of the hegemon, a chamber so vast it had its own weather. Before him sat the hegemon, not a single being, but a collective of ancient Krell, fused by cybernetics and millennia of rule, suspended in a nutrient-rich tank. It is confirmed, Valerius reported, his voice echoing in the chamber. The human abomination used Fisher physics. It tore a hole. The Watchers sensed it. A voice, synthesized, ancient, and tired, filled the air. It is as we feared. The plague has returned. The humans are reckless, primitive. They do not understand what they have built. They think it is a weapon. It is a beacon, and the singers have seen it. They stir in the deep void. The quarantine protocol is enacted. No human ship crosses the Perseus arm. No human colony is to be contacted. The species is infected. And the Covenant, Valerius asked, it still exists. It is contagious. The Covenant is the source. It must be sterilized, not captured, not contained. Sterilized. You failed, Valerius. Your fleet was Routedby vermin who summoned the wolf. I did not know, Valerius said, lowering his head. You did not believe. You believed like all Krell that our rule was absolute. You forgot we are not rulers, we are jailers. And the PRISONERS are beating on the walls. The humans have given them a hammer. Geo, take the Eternal Fleet, find the Covenant, find the source of the infection, the pilot, and erase it. Or all is lost. Valerius rose, his 4 eyes burning with a new, terrifying resolve. It was not anger anymore, it was fear. It will be done. Back on Station Prime, the debate was raging. Build more of them, Admiral Vance was saying, slamming her hand on the holographic map. We have the schematics, we have the loom's design. You can't, Elias shouted. You don't have the pilot. You put anyone else in that chair, you won't just kill them, you might rip a hole you can't close. Aris Thorne is a human, Vance countered, her face granite. He's brilliant, yes, but he's not unique. We can train others, we must. You don't understand, Elias pleaded. It's not piloting, it's a symbiosis, the drive. It changed him, and he changed it. It's not just a machine anymore. Captain, Vance said, her voice dangerously low. We are at war. The Krell are amassing their largest fleet since the Zethian pacification. It's not aimed at New Delphi, it's aimed here at us, at Earth. They are not containing us, they are preparing for extermination. They are afraid of this singer contagion. They're going to burn the plague, and we are the plague. Elias felt his blood run cold. They're coming. In force, Vance confirmed. We have one weapon that can stop them, one, the Covenant. We need your son. He's not a weapon. He is now. The argument was cut short by a blaring alarm. A frantic comms tech yelled, Admiral, unscheduled. God, unscheduled arrival, massive Krell energy signatures there. They're here, they're outside the station. How, Vance roared, our sensors, our patrols. Elias looked at the main screen. The Krell fleet hadn't jumped in, they were just there, a new kind of ship, not the bulky black destroyers. These were sleek, silver, and shimmering. They folded, Tila whispered, her hands over her mouth. They copied us. On the screen, a channel opened. It was Grand Archon Valerius. His face was grim, his 4 eyes filled with a fanatic's light. Admiral Vance, humans, your brief, blasphemous existence has come to an end. You have touched the abomination. You are forfeit. Surrender the Covenant and the pilot, the source, and we may be merciful to your homeworld. They're not Krell ships, Elias said, staring at the screen. They're Zethian ships, ancient designs, the Krell. They've reactivated the old fleet, the ships built to fight the Singers. Elias, Reyes said, her hand gripping his arm. The medbay alarm, it's Aris. Elias' head snapped to the internal sensor feed. The isolation ward was, dark, all power, gone. He's not there, Elias breathed. On the main screen, Valerius waited. You have 10 minutes, surrender the source. And at that moment, the alarms on Station Prime screamed. Not an external attack alarm, an internal one. Admiral, the tech shouted, the Covenant, it's powering up the Fisher Drive. It's spinning, someone is on the bridge. Elias Thorne sprinted from the command center. He knew. He arrived at the Covenant's docking bay just as the clamps were explosively retracting. He sealed the bulkhead door and ran onto the bridge. Aris was in the loom chair. He wasn't strapped in. He was standing in front of it, his hands resting on the dark console, which was pulsing with that deep, sickening blue light. He was wearing his flight suit. Aris, get out of the chair, Elias yelled. Aris turned, his eyes were solid black. No iris, no pupil, just two voids. They can't have it, Dad, he said, and the voice was not his. It was a chorus, a harmony of 1,000 whispers. The jailers, they're so afraid of the song. Aris, that's Valerius's eternal fleet out there. They've adapted, they know what you are. They think they know, Aris chorus replied. They've built nets, he smiled, a cold, alien expression. But you can't catch a ghost in a net. What are you doing? Elias pleaded. Going to talk to them. You'll be killed. I won't be, Aris whispered, and for a second the black faded and his own terrified eyes looked through. Dad, it's in me, the math, it's singing, I can't stop it. The Covenant shuddered. Docking bay doors are opening, Captain, the ship's computer stated calmly. Fisher Drive is at 90%. Aris, don't. Elias lunged for his son. Aris raised a hand. Elias wasn't thrown back, he just stopped. He was held in a pocket of localized, distorted space, frozen 2 feet from his son. The Krell are wrong, Aris chorus said, turning back to the loom. They think we're a beacon. The Covenant shot out of the docking bay, a black knife into the void, facing the armada of ancient silver ships. We're not the beacon, Aris whispered, as his hands sank into the loom's console as if it were liquid. We're the key. The Covenant vanished, not in a fold, not in a phase, it just shattered. It broke apart not into debris but into 1,000 points of blue light, a constellation of possibilities. On the bridge of the indomitable, Valerius watched, his 4 eyes wide with horror. No, he's not. He's not folding space, he's unraveling it. The 1,000 blue lights of the Covenant didn't attack. They spread. They phased through the silver ships of the Eternal Fleet, passing through their shields, their hulls, their crews. And everywhere they touched, they sang. The blue light song of the Covenant was not a sound. It was an idea. It was the first math, broadcast directly into the neural pathways of every Zethian crew member aboard the Krell's Eternal Fleet. For millennia, the Zethians had served the Krell hegemony. Their ancestors' abilities, the power to instinctively understand and manipulate non-Euclidean geometry, had been suppressed, beaten out of them, categorized as the Great Sin. They were taught that their own minds were a plague. They served the jailers out of fear, believing they were protecting the universe from their own nature. Now Aris Thorne, a human source acting as a key, was reinstalling the operating system. Aboard the Zethian crewed silver flagship, the Ancient Shield, a young Zethian pilot named Kale was at his console, his 4-fingered hands flying over the controls, ready to engage the Krell Fisher net. He was tracking the Covenant's impossible energy signature when the blue light, the idea, passed through him. It didn't hurt, it felt like remembering. He suddenly understood the Krell ship he was flying, not as a pilot understands a machine, but as a mathematician understands an equation. He saw the Krell's crude, brute force applications. He saw the Fisher net they were charging designed to trap a fold, and he saw how wrong it was. It wasn't a net, it was a drum, and the Krell were just beating it, making noise. Aris's voice, the chorus, entered his mind. They taught you to fear the music, but you are the music. Play. Kale looked at his Krell overseer, a hulking Praetorian guard standing behind him. He saw, for the first time, not a protector, but a liar. The abomination is, it's beautiful, Kale whispered. What did you say, slave? The Praetorian growled, raising his plasma rifle. Kale's hands moved, not in defiance, but with a sudden, joyful certainty. He wasn't following Krell orders. He was improvising. He took the Fisher net, the gravity trap array, and instead of deploying it, he retuned it. He rewrote the Krell's math. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Valerius watched his tactical display dissolve into chaos. What is happening? The ancient shield is... It's not firing the net. It's resonating with the Covenant. The ancient shield and then another silver ship, and then dozens began to glow. They weren't fighting the Covenant's energy, they were amplifying it. They were taking Aris's song and turning it into an opera. The Krell Praetorian guards on the Zethian bridges realized what was happening too late. They opened fire. Uprisings, brief and bloody, erupted across the Eternal Fleet. The Zethians, unarmed, were cut down by plasma fire. But not before they had acted. The Zethian fleet, hijacked by its own crew, turned on the Krell. The silver ships, which the Krell had brought out of storage to fight Fisher Physics, were now using it. They didn't fire lasers, they folded space. A Krell destroyer's plasma conduit was suddenly connected to its own bridge. The ship vaporized itself. Two Krell cruisers were stitched together, their hulls merging, annihilating each other. It was a rout, it was a massacre. The Krell's Eternal Fleet was being dismantled by its own Zethian crewed escorts. Valerius was paralyzed. His entire strategy, his entire worldview was based on the premise that the abomination was a force, an enemy. He had never, in all his centuries, conceived that it could be a message. They're communicating, Crix stammered, his 4 eyes wide with terror. The humans, they weaponized the Zethian heresy. Fools, Valerius roared, slamming his fist on his throne. You've killed yourselves, you've listened to the song, you've invited the singers. He looked out the viewport. The Zethian ships were dancing, folding, and resolving in impossible, beautiful patterns, systematically dismantling his armada. But Valerius was looking past them. He was looking at the sky. The space around Station Prime was thinning. The Covenant, still a cloud of decentralized blue light, was the epicenter. But the Zethian fleet, now resonating with it, was making it worse. The stars began to smear. The blackness of space itself seemed to curdle. Grand Archon, Crix pointed, his voice a dry rasp. Look, the vortex. A thing was appearing. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't matter. It was an absence. A patch of space darker than the void, a non-Euclidean shape that twisted the light of the battle around it. It was looking. The Void Singer had arrived. And it was not on the Krell's side. The singer looked at the Krell fleet, it looked at the Indomitable, and it sang. It was a psychic scream that hit every Krell on the bridge simultaneously. It wasn't a sound, it was the concept of annihilation. It was a mathematical proof of their own non-existence. The sensor technician clawed at his helmet, shrieking as blood poured from his eyes. Crix collapsed, his body convulsing. Valerius, protected by the ancient shielding of his throne, fought the song. He felt his mind being dissected. He saw his 400 years of life, his faith in the hegemony, his fear of the abomination, all of it, laid bare and judged as irrelevant. The Indomitable shuddered. Its engines died, its lights failed. The singer hadn't touched them, but its proximity was unraveling the Krell's technology. Their straight-line physics was failing in the face of true physics. The Zethian ships, however, were unharmed. They glowed brighter, their movements becoming more complex, more fluid. They were dancing for the singer. On Station Prime, the command center was in chaos. What is that thing? Admiral Vance breathed, watching her tactical display fail. It's not Krell, it's not us. Elias Thorne, released from his stasis when the Covenant shattered, watched the main screen. He saw the Krell fleet dying, he saw the Zethian ships rejoicing, and he saw the darkness. That was a Void Singer. He knew with cold certainty what was happening. Aris hadn't just called for help, he had opened the cage. He's lost, Elias whispered. My son, he's gone, he's been consumed by this. He's winning, Captain, Vance said, her eyes gleaming with a terrifying, predatory light. He's winning. You think that, Elias pointed at the swirling vortex of unlight, is winning? That is replacing one tyrant with another, with God. On the screen, the Zethian fleet, their Krell crews dead or imprisoned, finished their work. The last Krell destroyer was folded into itself. The Eternal Fleet was gone. Only the Indomitable remained, dark, powerless, drifting. The Zethian ships formed a perfect, spiraling circle around the Void Singer. They were waiting. And the Covenant, the cloud of blue light, began to resolve. It coalesced not back into the ship, but into a single, blindingly bright point of light. It hung in the void for a moment, and then it streaked. It flew past the Zethian fleet, past the Void Singer. And it slammed into the bridge of the Indomitable. Valerius was the only one left standing. His bridge was a tomb, his crew dead from psychic shock. The ship was cold. He was staring at the Void Singer, accepting his end. We were right, he gasped. We tried to protect. A blue light filled the bridge. It resolved not as a man, but as a figure of pure energy standing where his comms officer had been. It was Aris Thorn, but it was not. His eyes were solid blue light. His form was unstable, shimmering. The jailer, the voice was the chorus, the harmony, but it was cold. Source, Valerius spat, raising a sidearm. He fired. The plasma bolt hit Aris and was absorbed. The blue light brightened. Your rules, Aris Chorus said, taking a step. So little you hide. We contain, Valerius hissed. We protect the stable from the chaos. Stable, the Aris figure laughed, a sound of fracturing glass. You are stagnant. You are fear. You will end. The figure raised its hand. No, Valerius said. And from behind the Aris figure, a second voice spoke. A human voice, ragged, exhausted. And no. Elias Thorn stood in the shattered doorway of the bridge, his face pale, holding a standard-issue pistol. He hadn't come from the station. He'd been on the Covenant when it shattered. He'd been inside the storm. Aris, Elias choked, walking onto the bridge. The blue figure turned. The solid blue eyes wavered. Elias, Thorani, Father. Aris, that's enough, Elias said, walking past Valerius, putting himself between the Krell Archon and his. Son, you won, they're beaten. Beaten is not enough, they are wrong, they must be erased. And then what? Elias demanded. We trade the Krell hegemony for this. He pointed out the viewport at the Void Singer, which was now turning its gaze toward them. You trade a jailer for a void? Is that the truth you found? The blue figure wavered. It is necessary. No, Elias shook his head. It's just easier. The figure of Aris looked down at its own glowing hands. The blue light flickered. For a fraction of a second, Elias saw his son's face, twisted in agony. Dad, Aris's own voice, it hurts, make it stop. Silence, the blue light flared. Elias was thrown back against the wall. The process must complete. The Aris figure turned back to Valerius. The Krell Archon had risen, his plasma rifle in hand. He wasn't aiming at Aris. He was aiming at the loom console behind Aris. The Krell had installed one on their bridge, salvaged from the Zethian archives to run the Fisher net. It was their only connection to the first math. The abomination, Valerius snarled, dies, the sin ends. He fired. Elias shouted no. The Aris figure didn't move. It couldn't. It was locked in its own internal battle. The plasma bolt streaked across the bridge. It wasn't aimed at Aris. It was aimed at the Krell loom. Elias Thorn did the only thing a father could do. He moved. He pushed off the wall and threw himself in front of the console. The plasma bolt hit him square in the chest. Elias collapsed, his body smoking. The bridge fell silent. The blue, shimmering figure of Aris froze. The light in its eyes vanished. The form flickered, dissolved, and Aris Thorn, the man, collapsed to his knees. He looked at his hands, now flesh and blood. He looked at Valerius, who stared, stunned at what he had done. And then Aris saw his father, smoking, dying on the floor of the Krell flagship. No, Aris whispered, his voice his own. No, Dad. He crawled to his father's side. Outside, the Void Singer paused. The Zethian fleet stopped its dance. The song had stopped. Elias gripped his son's arm. Aris, he choked, a bloody froth on his lips. It's your choice, not theirs. I can't hold them back. Aris sobbed, the tears real. They're so loud. Then don't hold them back, Elias gasped, his eyes losing focus. Don't be the key, be the door close. It. Elias Thorne's hand went limp. Eris stared at his father's body. The silence on the bridge was absolute. The chorus was gone. The singers were gone. It was just him and his grief. A grief so profound, so human, it eclipsed the first math. He looked up at Valerius. The Krell Archon was frozen, his rifle shaking. He had just killed the only thing that had stood between him and the source. Eris Thorne stood up. His eyes were not blue. They were not black. They were a burning, human, furious red. You, Eris whispered. He walked to the Krell loom console, the one his father had died protecting. He placed his hands on it. You wanted the source? Eris said, his voice quiet, shaking with rage and sorrow. You wanted to see. He pushed, he didn't ask, he didn't negotiate. He poured all of his pain, all of his loss, all of his humanity into the drive. You want to end the abomination, Eris screamed. Then look at it. He didn't open the door to the Void Singers. He tore it off its hinges. The bridge of the Indomitable ceased to exist in any recognizable form. When Eris Thorne, fueled by a grief more potent than any theoretical physics, slammed his consciousness into the Krell loom, he didn't just activate the Fisher drive, he became it. The loom console, designed by the Krell to be a controller, a net, was not prepared for the source to plug directly in. It overloaded, shattering into a spray of liquid metal and light. But the connection was already made. Real space tore open. Grand Archon Valerius had a single, timeless moment of perfect religious terror. He saw the viewport dissolve. He saw not the Void Singer he had feared, the single, lurking shape, but the other verse itself. It was not a void, it was a plenum, a multiverse of solid, screaming geometry of light that held texture of shadows that had mass. And they were there, the singers, not one, not a dozen, but billions. They were a civilization of beings made of pure, sentient mathematics, a civilization the Krell hegemony had successfully hidden the universe from, until now. A single tendril of this other verse lashed out. It was not malicious. It was curious. It was a question. It brushed against the Indomitable. The Krell flagship, a mountain of black armor 3 kilometers long, unraveled. Its physics, the straight-line laws the Krell championed, were proven to be nothing more than a local bylaw. The ship's hull flowed like water. Its reactor evaporated into music. Its crew, including Valerius, did not die. They were reformatted. Their consciousness, their memories, their very beings were translated into a language of pure geometry and absorbed. Valerius's last thought was not of fear or of his hegemon. It was, "It's so beautiful." The Indomitable was gone. Eris Thorne floated in the center of the rift he had created. He was no longer just a man. He was a conduit, a swirling nexus of blue energy and raw human emotion holding the apocalypse open. He saw his father's body drifting unharmed in the eye of the storm. He saw the Krell fleet annihilated. He saw the Zethian ships frozen, basking in the song of the singer's dimension. And he saw Station Prime, where Admiral Vance and the human high command watched, paralyzed. The singers, the true ones, the ocean of them, were now aware of this dimension, fully. They saw the Zethians, their children, who had been stolen. And they saw the rest of the galaxy, the Krell, the humans, the silence. They Ari, quiet, the chorus was back, but it was no longer Eris's voice. It was the voice of the ocean. The jailers made them quiet. The singers began to emerge, not as ships, but as concepts. A wave of pure geometric reality began to pour out of the rift, ready to overwrite the stagnant physics of the Krell's protected universe. This was not an invasion. It was liberation. It was assimilation. It was the end. From the Zethian flagship, the ancient shield, a single transmission went out from the pilot Kale. It wasn't to the humans. It was to Eris. Source, you have saved us. They are home. The Zethian's voice was pure, weeping ecstasy. Eris, floating in the void, looked at his father's peaceful, dead face. He looked at the ecstatic Zethians. He looked at the onrushing truth of the other verse that was about to correct their reality. It's your choice, his father's voice echoed in his memory. His grief had been the key, his rage had opened the door, but his love for the flawed, stupid, quiet dimension his father had died to protect, that was the lock. No, Eris whispered, his own voice, small and human, cutting through the chorus. You can't. The quiet must end. The song must be sung. They're not ready, Eris screamed into the heart of the multiverse. Your song, it's too loud, it will drown them. They will learn or they are nothing. They are not nothing. Aris Thorn made his choice. He was the source. He was the key. He was the door. He would close it. He turned his will not against the singers, but against the rift itself. He flew back to the epicenter, the point of his own creation. He became the loom that had been destroyed. He gathered all the first math that he had unleashed, all the geometric song, and began to reverse it. It was the most painful thing he had ever done. It was like trying to force a god back into a bottle. The singers resisted. They pushed. They didn't understand. Why would anyone choose silence? Traitor * jailer * Krell. The chorus turned on him. The ocean of the other verse focused its attention not on the galaxy, but on the single, defiant human mind that was denying them. Aris felt his consciousness fracturing. He was being pulled apart, dissected, unwritten by the beings he had summoned. He was dying. He was failing. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm not strong enough. He was floating, adrift, his energy fatting. The rift widened. And then a hand grabbed his. He looked. It was Elias Thorn, not his body, his consciousness, his memory, the idea of his father. You are, Elias' idea said, his voice perfectly clear in Aris's mind. You're just pushing, stop pushing. You're not a wall, Aris, you're a human. What do I do? Aris wept, his energy form flickering. Don't fight them, talk to them. You're the source, you're the translator. You didn't just open a door, you started a conversation, so finish it. Aris looked at the onrushing singers. They weren't hate, they were exuberance, they were lonely. They had found others and they wanted to share. Aris stopped pushing. He stopped fighting. He opened his mind, his human mind, with all its grief, its loss, its love for his father, its fear, its frailty. He didn't shout at them. He sang. He sang a song not of perfect, cold geometry, but of imperfect, warm emotion. He sang the song of humanity, the song of a father dying for his son, the song of straight-line physics, of limits, of mortality, of choice. He sang, we are quiet because we are afraid, we are slow because we are growing. Your song is beautiful, but it is not ours. Give us time. The rift paused. The ocean of the singers listened. They had never heard this song before. It was flawed. It was chaotic. It was interesting. A new chorus answered, softer, curious. Time. R is pulled. With all his remaining strength, he pulled the rift shut. He didn't slam it. He closed it gently. The singers did not fight him. They let him. The other verse receded. The screaming, beautiful geometry faded. The hole in reality stitched itself shut. The last thing Aris saw before the rift closed was the ocean watching him, and the chorus left him with one final, chilling word. We will wait. The rift sealed. The non-Euclidean shapes vanished. The song cut off. The indomitable was gone. The eternal fleet was gone. The stars snapped back into their straight line, boring, Krell-approved positions. Silence. Aris Thorn, his energy spent, his body reforming from nothing, floated in the void. He was just a man in a flight suit. He looked at his father's body, drifting nearby. He used the last of the Fisher physics, the last echo of the song in his bones, to pull his father's body to him. He wept, holding his father, alone in the silent vacuum, surrounded by the liberated and now confused Zethian fleet. On Station Prime, the bridge was silent. Admiral Vance stared at the screen, her face ashen. The miracle was over. The war was over. What, she whispered, what happened? Reyes, who had been watching from her console, monitoring Aris's energy signature until it flatlined into human, covered her mouth. I think he just negotiated. Tila the Zethian was on her knees, her face a mask of awe and terror. He spoke to the gods, and they listened. The covenant, which had been a cloud, began to reform. The 1,000 points of light which had been scattered across the system flew back. They converged on Aris and his father's body. The ship rebuilt itself, particle by particle around them, the black hull plates stitching themselves together. The covenant was whole again. It sat in the void, its engines dark, its drive silent. A single ship floating in the graveyard of an empire. The Zethian fleet, led by the ancient shield, slowly approached. They did not menace. They bowed. They oriented their ships toward the covenant in a gesture of absolute, fearful reverence. Kale's voice came over the channel, open to Station Prime. He is the prophet, the voice he closed the door, he saved us from them and from ourselves. Admiral Vance stared at the Covenant. It was no longer a weapon. It was no longer a ship. It was a church. And it held the only man in the universe who had spoken to God and told him to wait. The silence that followed was heavier than any planet. The Covenant drifted back to Station Prime, not under its own power, but guided by the respectful, gentle tractor beams of the Zethian flagship, the Ancient Shield. The Zethian fleet, now liberated and terrifyingly powerful, did not disperse. They formed a protective, almost worshipping cordon around the human station. They had been given back their religion, their math, only to see its terrifying, all-consuming God be gently, firmly told no by a human. They were free, and they were lost. They had exchanged one jailer for a prophet. When the Covenant's ramp lowered, Aris Thorn walked out. He was carrying his father's body. He was just Aris, pale, exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed, his hair matted. The chorus was gone. The blue light was gone. He was just a man holding his dead father. Admiral Vance, Kenna Reyes, and Tila were waiting in the docking bay, flanked by an honor guard. The soldiers who had heard the comms, who had seen the god in the sky, looked at Aris with a mixture of awe and fear. Aris walked past them, his gaze locked on nothing. Aris, Vance began, her voice unusually soft. He needs a funeral, Aris whispered, his voice cracking. He saved me, he saved all of us from me. He carried his father to the medical bay, brushing past a stunned Dr. Hansen. He laid his father's body on a cot, and for a long, long time he just sat there, holding his father's hand. 3 days later, the Covenant was silent, docked, and cold. The loom was dark, the universe had changed. The Krell hegemony was gone. With the Eternal Fleet and the Indomitable annihilated, reformatted, the central pillar of Krell authority had vanished. The Ansible, their FTL communication network, had been corrupted by the Song. Systems, sectors, entire arms of the galaxy were cut off. The jailers were gone, the prison was dissolving. Reports trickled in, subject species were rising up. Krell governors were being overthrown. Some Krell, driven mad by the psychic echo of the singers, had simply ceased to function. The largest empire in the galaxy had crumbled in an afternoon. Aris Thorn sat in the command center on Station Prime. He was clean in a fresh uniform, but he looked hollow. He was in a debrief with Vance, Reyes, and Tila. They're calling you the Void Speaker, Vance said, gesturing to a tactical map that was now just a mass of red unknown markers. The Zethians, they'll do anything you say, Kale. Their new fleet speaker. He's asking for your orders. They want you to lead them. Lead them where? Aris asked, his voice flat. He was staring at his hands. I'm not that anymore. It's gone, the song. It's just static. Is it? Tila asked, her black eyes studying him. Or are you just afraid to listen? Aris looked at her. He died, my father, he died, to close that door, and you want me to knock again. He died, Reyes said, her voice firm, cutting through his self-pity, to give you the choice. He didn't die to stop you, he died to save you. There's a difference. The Covenant, Vance said, is different. Our engineers, they can't understand it when it reformed. It changed the loom, it's grown, it's biological, it's waiting for you. Aris closed his eyes, he could feel it. A low, quiet hum in the back of his mind. The loom calling, the singers listening. They're still there, Aris whispered. Waiting, they're curious, they want to know. Know what? Vance asked. Why, Aris said, standing up. Why we choose this flawed, painful, quiet existence, why we love, why we die, they don't understand. He looked at the Admiral. You wanted a weapon, I gave you an embassy. Aris walked out of the command center. He walked back to the Covenant. The ship was his alone. He walked onto the bridge. It was dark, but the loom was pulsing with a soft, white light. It was no longer the angry blue of the other verse. It was calm. He sat on the chair. He didn't connect. He just sat. What do I do now, Dad? He whispered to the empty bridge. He looked at the captain's chair, his father's chair. He realized he wasn't the pilot anymore. He wasn't the source. He was the captain. 1 week later, the IFV Covenant was repaired, resupplied. Captain Aris Thorn stood on his bridge. His bridge crew was different. Kenna Reyes was a tactical, But Tila the Zethian was at comms, and at the loom now renamed the Chorus console sat Kale the Zethian fleet speaker, his face a mask of intense, reverent concentration. Kale, Aris said, his voice steady, finding the captain's tone his father had always had. Can you hear them? Kale looked up, his black eyes shimmering. Yes, Captain, they are waiting, they are listening. And the Krell? The remnants are hiding, Kale said. They fear the prophet. Good, Aris said. Let them hide there. Irrelevant, he looked at Reyes. Kenna set a course, New Delphi. New Delphi, sir? Reyes asked, surprised. The colony is safe. The Zethian fleet is guarding it. The Krell are gone, Aris said, settling into his father's chair, it felt. Right, but the universe just got a lot bigger. The Krell weren't the only ones. They weren't the only ones hiding. There are other races, other quiet civilizations, and they're scared. He looked at the main screen at the starfield. The Krell built an empire on fear. They enforced silence. Well, the jailers are gone. The prison is open. Aris leaned forward. Humanity, we're not warriors, we're not gods, we're translators. He placed his hand on the loom console next to Kale's. He closed his eyes. He didn't open the door, he just whispered through the keyhole. He sent math, he sent music, he sent his grief for his father, his love, his hope. He sent a message, not to the singers, but to everyone else. The Krell are gone, do not be afraid. The abomination, the void, it is not what they told you, it is other, but it listens, and we are humanity, we are the Covenant, we are here to talk. The Covenant engaged its drive. It didn't tear space. It didn't fold it. It harmonized with it. The ship flowed into the void, a silent black knife leaving Station Prime behind. Humanity wasn't supposed to have ships like this. They weren't supposed to understand physics like this. The Krell had panicked because humans hadn't just broken the rules, they had questioned them. They had looked the abomination in the face, seen the mind of God, and offered friendship. The Galactic Empire was dead. A new age, an age of conversation, had begun. And the Covenant, part ship, part tomb, part embassy, flew into the new, loud, terrifying, and beautiful universe ready to speak.